in New York, in a New York state of mind. So I'm in upstate New York, literally pulled over at an abandoned restaurant with the truck back there, right here at the intersection of 9 North and 87 in the wonderful state of New York, and not just very close to the Hudson River actually, but way upstate, not near New York City. And you can kind of hear the cars going by on the freeway. Not the freeway, there's a highway. The freeway, God knows where it is. It's down, the interstate's down there somewhere. I don't know nothing from no interstates, man. I don't go on interstates. So I just put up a podcast in a New York state of mind in New York. My plan originally was to kind of meander my way across the Midwest, and I ended up making a lot better time than I was planning on making getting out to the state of New York. And it's quite a story. I had a little bit of a differential problem, which had to do with the replacement of a speed sensor back in Wisconsin that wasn't put in correctly. You'll have to listen to the podcast at thebobdavispodcast.com or iTunes or Spotify, the Bob Davis Podcast, for details on that stuff, because I don't want to take up a ton of time explaining what happened. Needless to say, I had a mechanical. I had to work the problem, and this is the point of the audio podcast. Was really proud of myself because I didn't get upset, I didn't get mad, I didn't freak out. I just put one foot in front of the other and kind of paid real close attention to what I was doing, and went to about 4 or 5 different mechanics in Jamestown. I had the presence of mind to assume that if I was in Western Pennsylvania when it started. When I decided to go to Jamestown, I picked Jamestown because Jamestown is an ancient, literally, manufacturing center going back to the 1830s. So I figured that people from Jamestown probably had a lot more experience in mechanics and manufacturing than the people in Western Pennsylvania. I don't know where I came up with that, but it turned out to be a good instinct, and I had a really good time with the guys at J1 Auto Service there in Jamestown, as well as a guy who is really the differential and transmission whisperer of Jamestown, a master mechanic who knew exactly what the problem was, and it saved me a lot of money, because if I'd freaked out and gone crazy, then I probably would have ended up spending a lot more money than the ultimately something like $200 that I spent. So I feel pretty good about that. And did some camping. Finally, it took a couple days. It was really stressful because I'd driven all day, like from 8:30 that day to leaving eastern Ohio, getting into western Pennsylvania. And it was rough because then I had to drive to Jamestown. So I don't usually I like to get off the highway at about 4 p.m. every day. And I don't like going much further past 4 or 5, especially when I'm looking for a place to camp and when it's dark. I mean, we've all seen these guys drive into campgrounds late in the afternoon or evening, and they're just frantic to find a space, and it's dark and they don't know where they are. And I have a pretty steadfast rule of just getting off the road at a certain time in the afternoon, so I'm not losing my mind driving around like a crazy person. So that night I was, because I made the decision to make a long story short, I had a major differential fluid leak. And no one could tell me what the problem was, and I thought, well, I'm going to have to get a new differential, and if I'm going to do that, I need to go someplace where there's going to be people that can do that and do it right. And I concluded that was going to be Jamestown. Well, I got a lot more than I bargained for, because they not only did they know how to fix it, they fixed it, and it didn't cost me a lot. I didn't need a new differential or any of that stuff. I haven't had problems with the differential in this vehicle hardly ever, other than replacing fluid, differential service from time to time. It has over 200,000 miles on it. I'm pretty sure that differential is original equipment. And I just replaced the speed sensor, and that was the beginning of the differential problem. So we got that straightened out. But it made me think about a lot of things. It made me think about keeping things simple. It made me think about local towns and local service, and that is something that you do not see when you are on the interstates riding across the country at 80 miles an hour. You don't see what life in small towns is like and what can be done. I sat at this place, J1 Auto, and they're not paying me to say this. They're probably not happy with me because they don't want nomads rolling up with no money and pleading for fixing. But I watched this guy, Jason, I think that's his name, who was running the shop, and there was a woman there too, and I'm sorry, I don't remember your name, but I watched them help people all morning and all day long, just doing things for people, trying to explain to people. They have this New York State inspection, which is stupid, but they have it, and people come in and they have problems. They have problems with their motor or engine or whatever you want to call it, and it's not passing inspection. And these guys are, helping people at least pass the inspection, or helping them by doing what they did with me, which was they sent me to this guy who was the transmission differential whisperer. Had to wait for him. He knew I was coming. They called him for me. He told me what the problem was. He was dead on. They fixed it. $200. They could have just gone to town on me if they wanted to. And I had a wonderful experience in Jamestown as a result of those guys. And I had a wonderful time sitting there in the office, BSing with people as they came in, and kind of, doing the whole guy in the office thing, talking to these guys. And he did just a wonderful, fantastic job, and I had a great time. But it reminds me that you got to keep it simple. You got to work a problem. I hope there's not too much wind in the mic. I hate that. You got to work a problem until you've solved the problem. And sometimes we get too impatient and we don't work a problem until we solve the problem. And as a result, the problem gets worse. And I wanted to do a podcast about keeping things simple, but it ended up being a podcast really about the whole Eastern Ohio, Pennsylvania, New York State experience. That's what it's called. And it kind of closes with a subtitle of, opens and closes with a subtitle of, I'm in a New York state of mind in the state of New York, Upstate, I should have said. And of course, this part of the country is just fantastic. This place I'm sitting was settled in 1799. A lot of the industrial stuff, like Jamestown's industrial history begins, and they certainly had a history before that. Their history as an industrial place begins in the 1820s and 30s. So if you're from the West, if you're from the Midwest, we're used to thinking that things are old, that they go back to the 1850s or the 1860s, even though there were settlers in Minnesota. Fort Snelling opened in Minnesota in 1820. There were settlers a little sooner than that over in eastern Wisconsin. But for us, anything older than 1860 is friggin' old. Out here, man, some of these places go back to literally the 1600s and early 1700s. So that's really great. And there's nothing like the way it looks. I'm in the Adirondacks. There's just something about the way it looks. I can't describe it. It's just, I'm not sure I can find the words for it. When you're on the road, you feel like you're in a Stephen King novel. I feel like I'm at the beginning of a Stephen King novel when I go on these, even though we're not even yet in Maine. We're in New Hampshire, we're in upstate New York. We're not in Maine, where he wrote, everything's about, obviously, Maine. It's just weird because it just has that feeling. It's a lot. This place, I'm going to pick up the camera so it's going to wiggle around a lot, but I want you to see all these things. This place is just an abandoned roadhouse kind of restaurant, fine dining restaurant. There's the truck. There's the Bob Davis Podcast website right there. But these places like this are all over the place in this part of the country. Keeping it simple. I had a couple of requests. It's odd. I'm loving the comments on YouTube. And again, now we're over 1,200 subscribers, and I appreciate that. And people are asking questions. Somebody said, hey, if you came up 20, which I did, you missed lunch. Well, I hate to say it, but by the time I was going up 20, I wasn't interested in lunch. I was trying to figure out how to get my differential fixed. And that was my main concern at that point. And then I got another interesting note on YouTube from somebody that said, you should do a Q&A. Q&As are pretty much standard procedure on YouTube, with ASMR artists and tarot card readers and people like that always say, okay, Q&A. I'm 35 years old. I'm married. I have 2 kids. They're not in, that kind of stuff. I don't really want to do that. I kind of like to let the story play out in the podcasts and here on YouTube when I choose to. But she asked because she said, I'm 35 years old. I'm not doing very well. And I would like to be able to travel in the end of my years. Now, I don't know whether that means that the end of her years are coming up a lot sooner than 35 or 65 or 75. But she wanted to know how I started doing this and how do I make money? Good question. While I'm doing this. The way you make money is you really, unless you have resources. I met a guy a couple of days ago that saw me in the Peter Santinella video. Now remember, I'm in upstate New York. I met this, they have these pull-offs, and you can pull off on the 2 lanes, you can pull off, there's nothing there, it's just a pull-off where you sit and drink coffee or something, make your own coffee. So I'm at the pull-off, and I hear this screeching. I hear this car go by, and I hear screeching, and I hear him turn around, and I think, oh boy, here we go. And he comes back, and I hear him pull in behind me, and I think, okay, here I go. This is going to be interesting. And I had all the doors open. It was kind of sort of raining, and this guy jumps out of his car, and he goes, you're that guy. And of course, my response is, I'm that guy, because generally I am. And he said, I just watched the Peter Santinella video, Off-Grid in the Desert, that he just did. Well, he thought that Peter had just done the video, and he goes, how did you get from the desert to here? I thought that, oh yeah, this guy's full of it. He's got some kind of a franchise where he's got a bunch of guys driving around with these Bob Davis ambulances. But no, I am that guy. And it reminded me what a powerful platform and what a great platform YouTube is. Even though I looked askance at it for so many years and kind of half-heartedly did it, Peter is the one that convinced me that I needed to put some videos up, and it's been getting great responses. So the questions are fantastic. We had a great conversation. The guy's name is Eddie. He's coming out to Quartzsite next year. He has a lot of resources. The guy owns a software company, and he has a diesel pusher, and he has an Airstream, a small Airstream trailer, a couple of different vehicles, and he has resources. So I don't think it's too much of a concern of him in terms of things like Starlink or better cell phone coverage or whatever it is that you need, because he has the resources. The first thing that you will learn doing this is some people have more resources than others. And those of us who don't have the kind of resources he has, by comparison, I have more resources than others, but I've learned you got to be very careful about spending money. One of the reasons I take back roads is because it's low and slow. You're not burning up all your fuel going 70 to 80 miles an hour. Aside from all the other distasteful things about the interstate, one of which is you don't get to see towns like this one, whatever this is. I don't even know the name of the town. You don't get to see the Black Bear restaurant across the street, or this sort of burned out, well, it's not burned out, but it's for sale, this looks like an old supper club or something to that effect. So that's one of the cool things about it. And Obviously, I came into this with more resources in terms of my media experience and what I'm doing with the podcast. I can generate revenue with the podcast. Eventually, I'm sure I'll be able to generate revenue with the YouTube channel and other things. People do make money on the road, but the idea that you're going to get, you're going to have unlimited resources is probably questionable. How did I get to be doing this? I bought this for $4,000 almost 10 years ago. More than 10 years ago. Actually, I bought it in 2000. Yeah, I bought it in 2014, so it's just 9 years ago. And I've had to do a lot of work. The differential, sort of indicates that. New sway bar, new transmission, over the years, things that have broken that have had to be gotten fixed, and now I need a new bumper. So there's always something that needs to be done, no matter what it is that you're driving. If you're driving a bus, it's going to be the same thing. If you're driving a van, like a relatively late model van, I think you're better off, or something like that. Buying an RV, I saw a post from a lady on Instagram, and I don't know what she was driving. She said, we have buses, gas bags that level this bus. This was a bad day. We just spent thousands of dollars on getting the gas bags fixed, and they still don't work, which means she's out of money to travel, right? And I thought to myself, and I'm sorry if I offend anyone, I'm not trying to, but the first question I thought of was, why on earth would you buy a bus with gas bags in it? Because you're going to be buying a lot of stuff that's going to fail the longer you use it. Because RVs, certain kinds of buses, are not built to be in constant use. This is built to be in constant use, and it's a beast. And 7.3 diesel, it's a fantastic truck. Yes, there are problems, and it costs money to fix, but so far, knock on aluminum, there hasn't been that grand mal problem. I mean, the transmission was not cheap. The other thing I wanted to say to her, I started because I made the decision. I traveled for 4 or 5 years in this thing, covering news events for my podcast, the pipeline protest, conventions, things like that, a lot of the political stuff in Iowa, and that was really fun because you just kind of go from town to town. And then I decided to go out full time because I knew that it was the right thing to do. I just knew it. And it was something I felt in my bones. And I still feel in my bones. I was having a wonderful, this is pure travel bliss. I haven't been in a city bigger than this one, basically, since I left Wisconsin. It's just been rural America all the way. It's fantastic. But I wanted to say to her, if you're thinking of going out as a woman, if you're thinking, I don't want to say if you think you're gonna, I was going to say if you're thinking of going out and traveling permanently, get as much money as you can first. If you really are in poor health, do a GoFundMe so that you have money and you can keep getting money, and you can use social media to post while you're on the road. Do not go out in your car. Now, some of my videos earlier and the stuff from the desert, we talked about that a little bit with the Peter Santinello thing. Don't go out in a car. I don't think it's a good idea, especially not for a woman. I have a friend that's in a Suburban, but she's very tough. I don't think I'd want to mess with her. So I don't worry about her as much as I worry about somebody who has no experience going out in a minivan. And there's people who will tell you to do that. There's a lot of vans now for sale. Late model vans, 2018s, 2019s. Scrape some money together and don't borrow the money, get cash if you can, and get yourself a van. At the very least, you can throw a sleeping bag and an air mattress down there and get a Heat Buddy heating system and a couple other things, and you can be self-sufficient in a van, and when that thing's buttoned up, nobody's going to know you're in there. And I think it's much better. It's better for anyone, really. One of the things that's great about this is people don't mess with an ambulance. The second thing is I can lock this thing up and I'm in there, and it would take some time for somebody to come in. Please, I don't even want to say that, but I've never had a problem. But I think women are a little bit more concerned, and maybe they should be, about weirdos trying to get to them, especially if you're a young woman, or if you're an older woman who's kind of frail. Many of the women I know that are doing this are armed, so there's a thought. So I'd get a van. I would not go out in a car. I think people are going to tell you to do that, and I don't think you should do that. So that's kind of the whole thing. Check out the podcast. It's just some stories from the road: Pennsylvania, Eastern Ohio, New York State, and I will be heading on into New Hampshire. Well, first Vermont. We'll see if I can camp there because they've had some damages after the floods, and certainly New Hampshire, northern New Hampshire first, and then eventually I'm going down to Manchester. Oh yeah, check me out on the podcast at thebobdavispodcast.com. I'll post a link to the podcast. I always do. Also Spotify, Google Podcasts, lots of podcast aggregators, and the website at thebobdavispodcast.com, where all the podcasts reside. If you listen to the Bad Service podcast I did a couple podcasts ago, it explains some of the changes I've had to make in content, which I'm actually embracing. I'm not going to get into it here, so that you understand that not all the podcasts are there after 2018. So going backward after 2018. That is all. I'm going to finish my coffee. Then I fill up again. Then I have one to drink while I'm driving. And I'm going to head on up north. Bye-bye.